In the land that is now modern-day Palestine and Israel, a unique group known as the Samaritans thrives. They are both an ethnic and religious community, tracing their lineage back to the ancient inhabitants of Samaria, the heart of the northern kingdom of Israel. However, their religious beliefs and practices differ significantly from those of mainstream Judaism. The Samaritans adhere to a religious tradition rooted in ancient Israelite practices but distinct from mainstream Judaism. They reject key elements of normative Judaism, including its Jerusalem-centered religious focus and scriptures, with the exception of the Pentateuch, the first 5 books of the Bible. Instead of Jerusalem, their religious center is Mount Gerizim. They believe that mainstream Judaism has deviated from the original teachings of Moses by abandoning Mount Gerizim, adopting foreign religious influences during the Babylonian exile, and emphasizing Jerusalem. Historically, Samaritans were viewed with suspicion and even hostility by Orthodox Jews because of their mixed ancestry, their allegiance to Mount Gerizim, and their status as political rivals of Judah. Nevertheless, both Samaritans and Jews share a common acceptance of the Torah. In the New Testament, Samaritans were often looked down upon by Judean Jews. However, Jesus used the parable of the Good Samaritan to emphasize the importance of ethics over religious formalism. Throughout history, Samaritans have faced numerous challenges, including persecution and near extinction in the early 20th century. In 2006, their global population numbered less than 700 individuals, with most residing near Nablus in the West Bank and in the city of Holon near Tel Aviv. Despite these trials, Samaritans consider themselves the remnant of the 10 lost tribes of Israel. They primarily speak modern Hebrew or Palestinian Arabic, although they use Samaritan Hebrew and Samaritan Aramaic for liturgical purposes. The historical origins of the Samaritans are a subject of debate. According to Samaritan tradition, the division between Jews and Samaritan Israelites began when a false high priest named Eli seized the priestly office from its rightful occupant, Uzi. Eli established a rival shrine at Shiloh, abandoning Mount Gerizim. This division challenged the conventional Jewish view that the kings of Judah, descended from David, represented true sacred kingship, as it suggested that an allegedly false high priest originally anointed these kings. Samaritans believe they are descendants of Israelites from the northern kingdom who remained in Israel after the Assyrian invasion of 722 BCE, and the Babylonian campaigns ending in 586 BCE. They reject the Babylonian religious influences that they believe infiltrated Jewish beliefs during this period. In contrast, mainstream Jewish tradition holds that Jerusalem was the sole legitimate center of worship for the God of Israel, and that Samaritans lost their status as true Israelites due to intermarriage and the adoption of pagan beliefs. Genetic studies have offered support to both origin theories, confirming that contemporary Samaritans descend from Israelites but also showing links to Assyrians and other foreign women. The historical narrative is further complicated by the Assyrian and Babylonian exiles, which led to the mingling of various groups and beliefs. Scholars suggest that only the middle and upper classes were deported, while lower classes intermarried with settlers, eventually forming a single community. Upon their return, upper-class Jews refused to recognize the descendants of the non-exiled Jews due to their intermarriage with non-Israelite settlers, regardless of their religious beliefs. Additionally, the issue of the Temple of Jerusalem played a pivotal role. While early Israelite religious practices involved worship at various high places and shrines, the construction of the temple in Jerusalem prompted a movement to centralize the faith. While the northern kingdom resisted this centralization, exiled Jews staunchly upheld the centrality of the Jerusalem temple and insisted that those who had intermarried must separate from their foreign spouses. The story of the Samaritans is thus one of ancient divisions, religious divergence, and the resilience of a unique community that has survived against significant odds. In the heart of ancient Israel, the mountain of Gerizim held a special place in the beliefs of the Samaritans. They believed that this was the chosen location where God had placed his name. This notion is rooted in Deuteronomy 12:5, which states that when the Israelites entered the Promised Land, they were to proclaim blessings on Mount Gerizim and curses on Mount Ebal. However, as history unfolded, the sacred status of Mount Gerizim became a source of conflict. During the later period of the divided kingdom, biblical tradition dictated that offerings to God could only be made at the temple in Jerusalem, prohibiting sacrifices at places like Mount Gerizim. This restriction was enforced by the prophets and documented in biblical books like Kings and Chronicles. Archaeological excavations indicate that a Samaritan temple was constructed on Mount Gerizim around 330 BCE. Interestingly, even Alexander the Great, during his time in the region, is said to have visited Samaria, including Mount Gerizim, rather than Jerusalem. The New Testament recounts a revealing conversation between Jesus and a Samaritan woman in John 4:7. In this exchange, the woman questions Jesus about the differences in worship between Jews and Samaritans, highlighting the long-standing divisions between these two groups. The era following Alexander the Great's arrival brought significant changes to the region. Samaria, much like Judea, experienced a divide between those who embraced Hellenistic culture and a more devout faction centered around Shechem and rural areas. This division coincided with the reign of the Greek ruler Antiochus Epiphanes, 175 to 164 BCE, who aimed to Hellenize his entire realm, including Judea and Samaria. Antiochus' efforts faced strong resistance from the Jews, which led to the Maccabean revolt. However, the Samaritans did not join in this rebellion. Their level of cooperation with the Greeks remains a matter of debate. Historical sources like Josephus and 2 Maccabees reveal the complex dynamics at play. Samaritans, under pressure, requested that their temple be named the Temple of Jupiter Hellenius. Yet, the extent to which they actively supported this renaming is uncertain. However, the schism between Jews and Samaritans had deepened. After the Maccabean victory, the Samaritan temple on Mount Gerizim was dismantled by the Jewish Hasmonean ruler John Hyrcanus around 128 BCE, marking the end of a 2-century existence. Today, only a few stone remnants of this temple remain. Under early Roman rule, the Samaritans continued to face adversity and economic challenges, enduring a difficult period in history. As the Common Era dawned, Samaria found itself under Roman rule, incorporated into the province of Judea. Yet, the Samaritans experienced a period of renewal in the 2nd century. They rebuilt the Temple of Gerizim following the Jewish Bar Kokhba revolt around 135 CE. During this time, the high priest Baba Rabbah played a pivotal role in shaping the Samaritan liturgy in the 4th century. Some Samaritans also served in the Sassanid army within the Persian Empire. However, the tides of history were not always in their favor. Under the Byzantine Emperor Zeno in the late 5th century, both Samaritans and Jews endured massacres, and the temple on Mount Gerizim was once again razed. In 529 CE, led by a messianic figure named Julianus ben Sabah, the Samaritans launched a war with the aim of establishing their independent state. Emperor Justinian I, with the assistance of Ghassanid Arabs, crushed this rebellion, resulting in the death and enslavement of tens of thousands of Samaritans. The Samaritan faith was all but outlawed by the Christian Byzantine Empire, leading to a dramatic decline in their population. By 634 CE, following the Muslim victory at the Battle of Yarmouk, many Samaritans fled the region. They established communities in Egypt and Syria, although these did not endure into modern times. During the mid-800s CE, Muslim zealots destroyed Samaritan and Jewish synagogues. Nevertheless, relations between Muslims, Jews, and Samaritans improved in the 10th century. In the 1300s, during the rise of the Mamluks, Samaritan religious sites were plundered, and some Samaritans converted to Islam out of fear. After the Ottoman conquest, Muslim persecution of Samaritans increased once more, with frequent massacres. According to Samaritan tradition, in 1624 CE, the last Samaritan high priest of the line of Eleazar, son of Aaron, passed away without issue. Descendants of Aaron's other son, Itamar, then assumed the office. By the 1830s, only a small group of Samaritans remained in Shechem. Local Arabs viewed them as atheists and enemies of Islam, threatening the entire community with violence. The Samaritans sought help from the Jewish community, eventually gaining support in their plea for respectful treatment. Persecution and assimilation took a heavy toll, drastically reducing their numbers. In 1919, a report in National Geographic stated that Samaritan numbers had dwindled to less than 150. Today, according to the Samaritan Community's Educational Guide, they number around 650. They are divided between the settlement of Kiryat Luza on their sacred Mount Gerizim and the Israeli town of Holon, near Tel Aviv. In the past, most Samaritans resided in the Palestinian town of Nablus at the base of Mount Gerizim. However, due to the First Intifada, they relocated to the mountain itself, leaving an abandoned synagogue in Nablus. The conflict in the region has followed them. In 2001, the Israeli army established an artillery battery on Mount Gerizim. Relations with both Jews and Palestinians have been mixed. Samaritans in Israel hold Israeli citizenship but complain of being treated as outsiders by Orthodox Jews. Palestinian Samaritans are recognized as a minority and send a representative to the Palestinian parliament. They have passports from both Israel and the Palestinian Authority. Given their small population and strict refusal to accept converts, a significant challenge for the Samaritan community is continuity. Marrying outside the community has recently been allowed for Samaritan men, provided that their spouses agree to follow Samaritan religious practices. In 2004, the Samaritan high priest Shalom b. Amram passed away, succeeded by Eleazar b. Tzedakah. The high priest is selected by age from the priestly family and resides on Mount Gerizim. The Samaritans, like their Jewish counterparts, hold a firm belief in one God, rooted in the covenant established between God and the people of Israel through the law of Moses. Their sacred texts include the Samaritan version of the Torah, known as the Abisha Scroll, along with the Mamar Marker, Samaritan liturgical texts, and law codes with biblical commentaries. The age of the Abisha Scroll remains a subject of debate among scholars. While it is regarded as ancient, its exact antiquity remains undetermined. Some Samaritan Torah scrolls are as old as the Masoretic text and the Septuagint, but the precise relationships between these texts remain a matter of scholarly inquiry. In contrast to Judaism, Samaritans do not consider books from the Old Testament such as historical writings, wisdom literature, or the prophetic texts as sacred scripture. Their Torah also differs from the Jewish Torah in certain aspects. Samaritans view several figures regarded as judges in Jewish tradition as kings, and their list of legitimate northern kings of Israel varies significantly from the biblical accounts in the books of Kings and Chronicles. Prominent Judean figures like David and Solomon play minor roles in Samaritan historical narratives. Samaritans share several religious practices with Jews, including Sabbath observance, circumcision of male infants, and adherence to strict rules regarding ritual purity. They celebrate important Jewish holidays such as Passover, Pentecost, and Yom Kippur, but do not observe Purim or Hanukkah. In Samaritan faith, the priesthood holds a central position. Notably, Samaritan lineage is traced through the paternal line, unlike the Jewish tradition of matrilineal lineage. The New Testament includes several references to Samaritans. The most famous of these is the parable of the Good Samaritan, found in the Gospel of Luke, chapter 10. In this story, Jesus imparts a profound lesson about compassion transcending boundaries. It begins when a scholar of the law tests Jesus by inquiring about the path to eternal life. To answer, Jesus asks the scholar what the Mosaic law states. When the scholar correctly cites the fundamental commandments of loving God and one's neighbor, Jesus affirms his response. He then tells the scholar the parable of the Good Samaritan. The parable recounts the story of a traveler who was assaulted, robbed, and left injured at the side of the road. When a priest and a Levite encounter the wounded man, they both pass by without offering assistance, presumably to maintain ritual purity. However, a Samaritan comes upon the injured traveler. Despite the historical animosity between Samaritans and Jews, the Samaritan immediately provides first aid and transports the wounded man to an inn for further care, promising to cover the expenses. At the parable's conclusion, Jesus asks the scholar which of these three passers-by acted as a neighbor to the injured man. The scholar acknowledges that it was the Samaritan who demonstrated neighborly compassion. Jesus responds, "Go and do the same." This parable is renowned for its moral message of universal compassion. To be called a Good Samaritan today is to be recognized as a generous individual ready to aid those in need. However, the parable's original message also emphasized non-discrimination and interracial harmony, a crucial lesson often overlooked. As the Samaritan population dwindled, this aspect of the parable became less prominent, and fewer individuals encountered Samaritans in any context other than this story. While the Gospel of Luke portrays the Samaritan in a positive light, Other New Testament passages display varying attitudes toward Samaritans. In the Gospel of John, the Samaritan woman of Sychar offers Jesus water to drink and later bears witness to him. Likewise, the Samaritans of Sychar extend hospitality to Jesus, with many coming to believe in him. Yet, not all Gospels share this perspective. The Gospel of Matthew, 10:5-6, records Jesus instructing his disciples, "Do not go among the Gentiles or enter any town of the Samaritans, go rather to the lost sheep of Israel." Furthermore, the Gospel of Matthew does not include the parable of the Good Samaritan or any accounts of Jesus interacting with Samaritans. This mixed portrayal reflects the ambivalence that has characterized the relationship between Jews and Samaritans throughout history.